They thought they had everything under control. The perfect patrol, the perfect sky. It was March 22nd, 2025, high above the Red Sea. The air was clear. The ocean below shimmered like glass, and a US Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcon sliced through the blue on routine watch. No tension, no threats, until suddenly, ping. A red light flashed on the heads-up display. Radar lock. Another blip, then another. Missile launch! Brake! Brake! The pilot didn't even think. Instincts kicked in. He slammed the stick. The Falcon rolled hard right, flares blasting out behind him like fireworks in broad daylight. Countermeasures engaged. A deadly infrared-guided missile had just been fired straight from Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen, fast, silent, and locked onto that jet like a hunter that never misses. The pilot dove hard, engines howling, pushing the Falcon past its limits. Below the radar line, a US electronic jamming unit, a Growler, flooded the sky with interference. Above, an E-2D Hawkeye spun up from the USS Eisenhower, its operators watching the chaos unfold in real time. The missile twisted mid-air, adjusting, tracking the Falcon's heat plume. 30 seconds to impact. The pilot yanked a brutal 9G turn, the whole jet groaning under pressure. "Fox 3, defensive," he shouted, as another flare burst bright behind him, hotter than the sun. The missile's sensors scrambled, confused for just a second too long. And then boom, it detonated mid-air, too far to hit, but close enough to rattle every nerve in his body. The jet survived. But survival wasn't the real story. The question now was, why fire and miss on purpose? Because this wasn't just a random attack, this was bait. The Red Sea had been heating up for weeks, and not just from the sun. Commercial tankers were rerouting, US destroyers were crisscrossing the waters, and Houthi forces were testing limits, getting bolder by the day. And this wasn't even their first stunt. Just a few days earlier, a US MQ-9 Reaper drone had been blasted out of the sky off Yemen's coast. It never even had time to react. Within minutes, the Houthis bragged about it on Telegram, posting shaky clips of the flaming wreckage splashing into the sea like it was some kind of victory parade. That video spread fast, and the response came just as fast. But instead of backing down, the Houthis got cocky. They thought they could pull the same move on a fighter jet that they did on a drone. Huge mistake. The US had already warned them. Carrier strike groups shifted, destroyers repositioned, surveillance tightened. Still, the Houthis, loaded with Iranian tech and training, believed they could keep pushing the line without facing real payback. So when that American F-16 popped up on their radar, they didn't hesitate. They fired again. But this time, the jet fired back. That Falcon wasn't just randomly cruising through the zone, it was part of a massive ISR net. Intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. Its mission, sniff out active missile sites hiding along the Yemeni coast. What the pilot didn't realize in that split second was that he had just become the final piece in a dangerous game. Bait versus bait. See, in the weeks before, the Pentagon had quietly changed the rules. No more waiting, no more guessing. If a radar locked onto the wrong aircraft, that signal was now considered hostile. If a launch occurred, retaliation was automatic. No delays, no clearance needed. The US had officially moved to a new posture, quiet, formal, and lethal. And that's where the Houthis slipped up big time. Their launcher lit up just long enough to be tracked, fired once, and, in a fatal error, stayed online a few minutes too long. Enough for American systems to pinpoint its location. Enough for the world to realize the Red Sea wasn't just heating up. It was about to explode. That would be their last mistake, the one they'd never get the chance to fix. Back aboard the USS Eisenhower, the pilot's frantic call didn't just echo through the comms. It was instantly recorded, broken down, and turned into live targeting data. Heat signatures, missile trails, GPS coordinates, all lit up across the combat screens like fireworks. The retaliation clock had already started ticking, and it was ticking fast at 28,000 feet. The F-16 was still racing west, hugging the edge of Yemeni airspace, engines roaring like thunder. The pilot barely had a second to breathe after his evasive dive when his RWR, the radar warning receiver, lit up again. New contact, different direction. That first missile had missed, but this wasn't over. Not even close. Multiple radar locks started flashing across the display, staggered, fast, and deadly. His AN/ALR-56M system screamed in his headset, "Threat SA-6 lock." An SA-6 old-school Soviet surface-to-air missile tech. But the Houthis weren't using antiques anymore. They had Iranian knockoffs, upgraded with new seekers and mobile launchers. Clunky, yes, but once they were hot, they were lethal. And right now, they were locked on tight. The pilot gripped the throttle, slammed the afterburners, and toggled the countermeasure system. Flares armed and ready. Behind him, the jet's exhaust burned white-hot against the cold desert night. A perfect target for heat-seeking warheads. Viper 3, defensive. Multiple locks, repeat. Multiple launch points. Requesting support overhead. He barked into the radio, voice sharp and fast. Instantly, a Navy Growler from VQ-140 answered the call. Its jammers poured a storm of electromagnetic interference into the sky, scrambling Houthi radar like invisible static. It wasn't perfect, but it gave that F-16 a razor-thin slice of time, just enough to act. The pilot dove hard, pushing the Falcon down fast. Gravity slammed him into his seat as his blood rushed out of his head. His vision narrowed, his breath short, but he held his course. The jet weaved and rolled through the dark, flares bursting behind him in waves, bright streaks cutting through the night like fireworks behind a phantom. Then came another bone-crushing turn. A barrel roll at 700 knots. One of the incoming missiles screamed past, missing by maybe 200 feet, close enough to shake the canopy, but not close enough to kill. The sky exploded behind him, but he was still flying. And what the Houthis didn't know, they weren't the hunters, they were the hunted. Way above, nearly 60,000 feet up, a Navy MQ-4C Triton drone was quietly circling in wide ISR loops, watching everything. It didn't need weapons. Its eyes were the weapons. It tracked every thermal flare, every radar ping, every electronic pulse. All that data streamed straight back to the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Eisenhower in real time. The entire fight, in from first missile to last, lasted less than 2 minutes. But the aftermath? That would take hours to clean up. As the pilot leveled off above the Red Sea, circling in a holding pattern, 2 more aircraft entered the zone. First, another F-16 from the 421st Fighter Squadron pulled up on his wing, scanning for more threats. Seconds later, a command came through. Engagement confirmed. Target data locked. Hold position. Birds en route. Translation? Strike package inbound. But even before the jets took off, the Navy had already started the next move. Deep inside an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer sailing nearby, vertical launch system, VLS, hatches opened like the jaws of a beast. Inside, Tomahawk cruise missiles, precision-guided, long-range, and locked for immediate launch. The order came just 5 minutes after the last missile threat ended. Target Alpha, fire 1, confirm trajectory. Then, whoosh, 1 missile, then another, then 4, each roared into the night sky, curving east toward Yemen's coast like shooting stars of vengeance. The air crackled with silence after the burn, the kind of silence that comes right before impact. And this was only the beginning. On the deck of the USS Truman, the next wave was already gearing up. Phase 2. Pilots were sprinting through pre-flight checks, jets being fueled, weapons loaded with precision. This wasn't chaos. This was protocol, a move straight out of the playbook. The moment that first missile launched at the F-16, the counter-strike plan had already been set in motion. The Houthis' missile had failed to hit its target, but it had done something far worse for them. It gave away its position. Every bit of telemetry, launch origin, heat pattern, radar pulse, handed the US Navy a perfect target map. In modern warfare, that's all it takes. Data becomes destruction. As the Tomahawk skimmed low over the waves, the strike package took off in formation. First up, an E-2D Hawkeye, electronic overwatch, eyes of the fleet. Next, 2 EA-18G Growlers, the Ghostmakers, ready to blind enemy radar and jam their comms. Then came the heavy hitters, 4 FA-18 Super Hornets, each loaded with GBU-38JDAMs and AGM-88 HARM missiles. The mission was locked and loaded. Primary target, the missile launcher site. Secondary, a suspected command post nearby. Tertiary, a mobile radar truck that had been spotted earlier by drone thermal scans. One by one, the Hornets catapulted off the carrier deck, wings wide, engines screaming, afterburners flaring, climbing into the night sky as the strike group closed in for the kill. The Growlers began their run, silent predators streaking through the dark sky. Their wideband jammers lit up the spectrum like a storm, frying every radar screen within miles. Down below, the Houthis probably had no idea they were already in the crosshairs, not until the first explosion shattered the silence. Boom! The Tomahawks struck first, precise, unstoppable, brutal. The radar trailer was vaporized in seconds. The missile launcher, shredded, burning, twisted metal scattered across the desert. Then came the Super Hornets, roaring in from 25,000 feet like thunder from the heavens. JDAMS dropped in deadly silence. No warning, no noise, just perfect impact. One after another, they hit their marks. Then came the chain reaction. Secondary explosions lighting up the coastline. Ammo, gone. Fuel, ignited. Maybe even more hidden missiles cooked off in the blast. The last strike came from a HARM missile that locked onto a final desperate radar ping, some mountaintop operator's last move before everything went dark. By the time it hit, the air was choked with smoke and fire. Back in the cockpit of the original F-16, the pilot listened in quiet focus. No celebration, no adrenaline-fueled cheers, just confirmation over the comms. Target neutralized, strike successful, RTB. The Red Sea was calm again, but this time, that calm had a price, and a message. If you launch at a US jet, you better hope it hits. Because if it doesn't, the next thing coming isn't one missile, it's everything. People say modern war moves fast, but this was surgical. From the moment that F-16's data feed locked onto the missile trail, before the pilot even dodged the blast, the Navy already had what it needed. Timestamps, telemetry, launch vector, GPS coordinates, thermal spikes, the full kill chain. The strike group didn't just see what happened, they saw where it happened. And that changed the entire game. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Eisenhower, the vibe flipped in seconds. From defense to offense. No yelling, no panic, just calm, crisp voices reporting locks and confirmations. Telemetry confirmed. Launch grid locked. Target Alpha hot. The screens glowed red with live targeting data. And then came the voice that sealed the deal. The Eisenhower's commanding officer didn't hesitate. Just one line. Package Bravo. Execute. And that's when it all kicked off. Package Bravo, in Navy talk, isn't a warning shot. It's a full-scale hammer strike. It's the code name for a multi-domain retaliation. Cruise missiles, airstrikes, electronic warfare, all synchronized into one devastating sequence. The rule's simple. If a system locks on or fires at a US aircraft, it becomes a target. And tonight, the Houthis had just painted bullseyes on themselves. The operation unfolded like clockwork. Aboard an Ali Burke-class destroyer sitting 100 miles off Yemen's coast, the VLS cells began to open, steel hatches yawning like mechanical jaws. Inside, 25-foot Tomahawk cruise missiles waited, long-range, GPS-guided, brutally precise. They don't need pilots. They don't even need a second thought. All they need is a target. And now they had four. 4 Tomahawks launched in perfect sequence. Not frantic, not rushed, just cold efficiency. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Vanishing arcs slicing across the night. Target 1, Missile Site Alpha, confirmed SAM launcher. Target 2, Mobile Radar Vehicle. Target 3, Suspected C-2 Hub near Ras Isa, Command and Control Central. Target 4, Ammunition Storage Depot spotted by an MQ-4C Triton's thermal scan. Every coordinate locked, every missile programmed. All 4 in the air within 5 minutes. Meanwhile, 70 miles away aboard the USS Truman, the flight deck was alive with motion. Steam hissed from catapults. Red shirts loaded GBU-38 JDAMS and AGM-88H ARMS, while green shirts refueled jets with machine-like precision. Yellow shirts waved in the Super Hornets, guiding them into launch position. The deck reeked of jet fuel and sea salt, pure adrenaline in the air. Above, an E-2D Hawkeye had already taken flight, its radar dish spinning wide, mapping every movement on the ground and in the air. Moments later, Two EA-18G Growlers rocketed off the deck, the silent Stormbringers. These weren't just attack aircraft, they were blackout machines. Armed with ALQ-218 receivers and jamming pods, they turned enemy radar into nothing but noise. No lock-ons, no tracking, just pure chaos in the enemy's systems. Following the Growlers came the heavy payload, 4 F/A-18 Super Hornets fully loaded and ready to strike. Hardpoints packed tight with JDAMs and HARMs, smart bombs and radar seekers designed to hunt signals and obliterate them. One by one they launched, afterburners roaring, engines howling as they vanished into the black sky. And still, far above it all, a Navy MQ-4C Triton drone circled like a silent witness. Not a sound, just cold optics, hot targets. It tracked the aftermath, the heat plumes, vehicle movement, any hint of survivors or evacuation attempts. The second any Houthi unit tried to hide or move, the Triton flagged it. That data flowed instantly, drone to satellite to the Eisenhower's fire control team, who stood ready to redirect strike assets in real time if anything slipped through. This wasn't revenge anymore, this was architecture. Every shot, every launch, every counterstrike, perfectly timed, precisely placed. And at exactly 2:12 local time, the entire operation locked into motion, a chain of precision, coordination, and dominance that proved one thing loud and clear. The US didn't just respond, it controlled the fight. The first Tomahawk struck hard, missile site Alpha, gone in an instant. Surveillance drones circling overhead caught the fireball as it lit up the desert night. Secondary explosions rippled through the site, proof that the place had been packed with hidden ordnance. The heat signature burned on for over 20 minutes, glowing like a wound in the earth. 2 minutes later, Target 2, the radar truck, turned into a bloom of orange flame. Its systems had lit up for one last desperate scan, but that single pulse was all a HARM missile needed to lock on. It screamed in like a bloodhound chasing heat, and seconds later, nothing was left but scorched sand and twisted steel. Then came Target 3, the suspected command post, tucked deep into a hillside and camouflaged with netting, a bunker built to survive. But survival didn't stand a chance tonight. One JDAM from 20,000 feet smashed through the roof, ripping the blast doors clean off. A second bomb followed, collapsing the entire structure into itself. The hillside folded inward, gone. And then, Target 4, the ammo depot. It went up like the 4th of July, a roaring cascade of color and chaos. The FA-18S had swooped in low, fast, and precise, their racks emptied clean before they climbed back into the clouds. No losses, no alarms, no mistakes, just silence, smoke, and devastation below. While the strikes ripped through the coast, the Growlers ran the invisible war in the background. Their jammers flooded every known Houthi frequency, scrambled early warning radars, and spoofed sensors into seeing phantom fleets that didn't exist. For minutes, enemy screens lit up with ghosts, entire armadas that were pure illusion. By the time the Houthis realized what hit them, it was too late. Their radar was blind, their comms were dead, and their command posts couldn't even call for help. No chatter, no coordination, just confusion, fear, and static. They had fired at a single US fighter jet, and the machine that answered was something far beyond their imagination. And it wasn't just the Houthis who got the message, it was everyone watching from the shadows. Their Iranian backers felt it too. This wasn't just payback, it was a demonstration. You might get lucky against a slow-moving drone, but you try that same stunt against a fully loaded F-16 or FA-18, and what's coming next isn't a warning shot. It's a synchronized, multi-layered counterstrike that erases everything in its path. Because war today isn't just about missiles and machines, it's about perception. The Houthis didn't just lose hardware, they lost credibility. They exposed their networks, their launch patterns, their entire playbook, and the US crushed it all in one clean, coordinated strike. Precision, steel, and electromagnetic dominance, that's what modern warfare looks like. Now, every Houthi radar operator sitting behind a console will hesitate before hitting the switch, because deep down, they'll be asking themselves, is this the one that gets me vaporized? Even though the US didn't issue a single press release, the world still took notice. Satellite imagery leaked, intel analysts connected the dots, and military observers saw the signs. News outlets whispered. Defense circles buzzed. And the message spread, quietly but clearly, across boardrooms and war rooms in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran. The takeaway? Don't test US air power unless you're ready to fight a completely different kind of war. One where the United States doesn't just react, it redefines the entire battlefield. After the dust settled, the carrier air wing shifted into full combat air patrol mode. That meant 2 armed jets in the air at all times, 24/7 coverage, circling, scanning, ready to respond in seconds if another radar dared to blink. The Red Sea wasn't just a watch zone anymore, it was a warning zone. The Houthis thought they could take a shot at an American fighter jet and walk away untouched. They were wrong, dead wrong. They didn't just lose a missile site, they lost momentum, assets, and the illusion that they could act without consequence. The US didn't just retaliate, it set the rules for the next round. Now, here's the question I want to throw to you. If you were the one in command that night, what would you have done? Would you have stopped after neutralizing the launcher or pushed harder, taking out every radar site along the Yemeni coast to make the message permanent? Think about it. Drop your thoughts below. Be honest, be strategic. We read every single comment. And while you're here, if this breakdown gave you chills, clarity, or a deeper respect for the sheer precision of modern warfare, hit that like button so we know you're dialed in. Subscribe to stay ahead of the next incident before it makes headlines, and ring that notification bell so you're the first in when the next mission drops. And hey, if you want to go one step further and support the channel directly, join the fleet. You'll get loyalty badges, priority replies, and help us bring even more real naval operations and stories to light. Click join on our channel page and step aboard, because one missile might start a war. But the response, that's what ends it. The world didn't even have time to process what had happened before the next phase quietly began. Hours after the strikes, the Red Sea was calm again. But the calm wasn't peace. It was the kind that hums before something bigger. The US Navy had just proven it could erase a threat in minutes, and now it was tightening its grip on the region. Back aboard the USS Eisenhower, the Combat Information Center buzzed with quiet confidence. The ops team was already reviewing drone footage, analyzing debris fields, and confirming the destruction of every hostile radar signature along Yemen's coast. Nothing was left standing. Not a launcher, not a command truck, not even a shadow on infrared. But the real story wasn't what had been destroyed. It was what came next. Because this wasn't just a one-night strike. It was the start of a shift. The Pentagon authorized what insiders called Operation Clear Current, a sustained maritime enforcement zone stretching across the Red Sea, designed to choke off hostile missile activity before it could even spark. By dawn, 2 destroyers had repositioned along the choke points near Bab el-Mandeb, while reconnaissance satellites adjusted orbits to monitor every movement in Houthi-controlled areas. The US didn't just strike back, it rewired the battlefield. Every sensor, every radar sweep, every patrol route was synced into one integrated network. If another missile so much as powered on, it would be seen, tagged, and marked for elimination in seconds. But here's the part that rattled everyone watching. Within 48 hours, shipping traffic through the Red Sea returned to normal. Commercial tankers that had been rerouting for weeks came back online, and insurance premiums on maritime routes suddenly dropped. The message was loud and global. The Red Sea was back under protection, and no one dared to challenge it. Still, behind the scenes, intelligence analysts were digging deeper. Satellite photos of the strike zones revealed something unexpected. Fragments of missile casings marked with Fateh 313 serial codes, an Iranian short-range ballistic system not previously seen in Houthi hands. That discovery changed everything. It meant this wasn't just a local militia taking shots, it was a test run. And that realization sent a jolt through every defense desk in Washington, London, and Tel Aviv. Because if Iranian proxies were experimenting with upgraded hardware, it meant Tehran was getting bolder, pushing the line further under the radar. The strike that night hadn't just destroyed missiles. It had exposed a supply chain, a strategy, and a network stretching far beyond Yemen. So the US response went deeper. Within days, cyber warfare teams from US Cyber Command launched Operation GhostNet, targeting the digital backbone behind the Houthi missile program. Command nodes went dark. Satellite uplinks crashed. Logistics systems froze. What started as a physical strike turned into a digital blackout. No missiles could launch if their networks couldn't even boot up. Meanwhile, in the skies, the patrol tempo hit new levels. The carrier air wings from both the Eisenhower and Truman operated in constant rotation. F/A-18S and F-35CS running combat air patrols, Growlers keeping the spectrum jammed, and Triton drones mapping everything from radar spikes to heat signatures. The Houthis couldn't move a single launcher without being seen. On the ground, reports trickled in from local sources. Equipment abandoned, comms silenced, operators retreating inland. Some intercepted chatter, even revealed panic inside the Houthi ranks. "They see everything," one voice allegedly said over a scrambled radio. "Even when we hide." Iran, on the other hand, kept quiet, officially denying any involvement, but unofficially, they were taking notes. The message was clear. If their systems were caught being used, it wasn't just their proxies that would suffer. The whole chain could be next. And across the world, military watchers couldn't stop talking. Defense analysts called it a masterclass in precision deterrence. In less than 6 minutes of engagement, the US had turned an ambush into a global statement. It wasn't about revenge, it was about control, dominance, and the ability to neutralize chaos before it even began. But the most chilling part, the US didn't brag. No press conferences, no viral footage, no threats, just silence, the kind that makes adversaries sweat. Because silence meant readiness, and readiness meant power. Then came the leaks. Whispers from Pentagon insiders hinting that the US wasn't done yet. Phase 2 of Operation Clear Current was already underway, involving electronic tracking grids and stealth drones capable of pinpointing mobile launchers in real time. The idea? To end the game before it even starts. Across the internet, armchair analysts lit up forums trying to guess what was next. Some claimed new hypersonic surveillance drones were being tested in the region. Others swore they spotted stealth bombers on satellite images parked at Al Dhafra Air Base. Whether true or not, one thing was certain. The balance of fear had shifted overnight. The Houthis had fired one missile, and in doing so, they had awakened the most precise strike system on Earth. Every radar pulse, every heat flare, every comms ping they sent was now a flashing red light to the US Navy. They weren't fighting blind anymore. They were fighting ghosts that could see them in the dark. And for the first time in months, the Red Sea wasn't a war zone. It was a warning zone. Ships moved freely again. US pilots patrolled without interference. The message was sealed in smoke and silence. And it was global. If you aim a missile at an American aircraft, you don't just start a battle, you trigger a blueprint. A blueprint of retaliation so fast, so coordinated, and so devastating that by the time you realize what's happening, it's already over. So here's the next question. Now that the US has drawn a hard line in the sand, what happens when another power tests it? Do we see a repeat, or something even bigger? Drop your thoughts below, because what just happened in the Red Sea might be the first chapter of a whole new kind of modern warfare. By the next sunrise, the Red Sea looked peaceful, but beneath that calm, the chessboard had shifted. The world's most powerful militaries were suddenly on edge, not because of what the Houthis had done, but because of how fast the US had answered. Nations that thought they could play in the grey zone, the shadow game between open conflict and denial, were now rethinking every move. Satellite constellations from Europe, India, and even private tech companies started tracking US carrier movement. News anchors were still talking about the mystery explosions off Yemen, while defense insiders already knew what it meant. America had drawn a line, and this time, it wasn't invisible. Inside the Pentagon, intelligence briefings were heating up. Analysts were poring over intercepted data, tracing the Iranian missile components that had ended up in Houthi hands. A digital map glowed with connection points: Tehran, Damascus, Sana'a, even shipping routes through Eritrea. Operation Clear Current wasn't just a retaliation anymore. It was turning into a hunt. At the same time, something new was happening out at sea. A third carrier group, rumored to be the USS George H.W. Bush, was moving through the Suez Canal under radio silence. Officially, it was a scheduled rotation. Unofficially, it was muscle, a message that the US wasn't leaving the region anytime soon. And with every move, the tension rose. Iranian naval units began shadowing cargo lanes near the Strait of Hormuz, pretending to protect commerce. In response, US P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft started running daily flights, tracking, recording, waiting. The Red Sea was quiet, but everyone watching knew that kind of quiet doesn't last. Meanwhile, deep inside the Eisenhower's Combat Information Center, a new feed lit up, live intel from a Triton drone flying over central Yemen. It had spotted something strange. A convoy of trucks moving at night with their lights off, heading into the mountains. The vehicles weren't civilian. Their heat signatures were too strong, their formation too disciplined. Command tagged it instantly. Possible launcher relocation. "Confirm tracking," the ops officer said. "Keep eyes on. No strike authorization yet." For hours, the Triton followed the convoy from the stratosphere. Silent, untouchable, a ghost with perfect vision. When the trucks finally stopped, analysts noticed something even more concerning. They weren't unloading missiles. They were unloading communications towers, generators, and radar panels. It wasn't another missile battery. It was something bigger, a new command site, possibly built to coordinate attacks from multiple fronts. That changed the game again. Because this wasn't about one attack anymore. It was about capability expansion. Someone wanted to rebuild faster than the US could respond. So, the Pentagon authorized Phase 3, an intelligence fusion push. Naval Command, NSA analysts, and satellite teams all synced under one directive. Find the hidden command network before it goes live. Every transmission out of northern Yemen was logged, triangulated, and dissected in real time. For the first time, an entire shadow war was unfolding through algorithms and AI-powered detection, a battle of silence versus signal. At the same moment, thousands of miles away in Tehran, high-level officials met behind closed doors. Sources later whispered that the tone was furious. The strike on Yemen had been a humiliation, and now their regional operations were under a microscope. But even then, there was fear. Fear that if they struck back too openly, the US response wouldn't stop at Yemen. And just when it seemed like things might cool off, they didn't. On April 2nd, an American P-8 patrol aircraft detected a long-range radar activation near the Gulf of Aden. Something new, something with power levels far beyond standard Houthi systems. Within minutes, the data was verified. This wasn't a Houthi signal at all, it was Iranian. That single detection set off alarms up the chain. Every carrier, destroyer, and patrol aircraft in the region went to Condition 2, heightened readiness. The message from command was simple: track, don't engage, unless engaged first. Back on the Eisenhower, the atmosphere thickened. Pilots suited up, deck crews fueled fighters. Combat air patrols doubled. A radar operator looked at his screen and said quietly, "If this goes live, it's gonna be another night like March 22nd. But there was one key difference this time. The US wasn't reacting blind. They had the pattern, the data, and the tools. In the hangars below deck, technicians prepped new pods for the FA-18S, experimental anti-radiation modules designed to locate radar sources within seconds of activation. This was cutting-edge warfare, live-tested in real conditions. And then it happened. The radar pulse spiked again. But it wasn't coming from Yemen anymore. This time, it was coming from offshore, near an unmarked vessel operating without a transponder. "Unknown vessel, bearing 090, range 78 nautical miles, the CIC officer called out. Possible mobile radar or disguised launcher platform. That was it, the proof they needed. Someone was trying to move the battlefield onto the water. Within minutes, the Truman launched 2 Growlers, followed by a pair of Super Hornets armed with precision glide bombs. The order was clean. Visual ID, confirm threat, neutralize if hostile. As they approached the target zone, the Growlers picked up heavy electronic chatter, encrypted, foreign, and aggressive. It wasn't local militia talk, it was military-grade coordination. "They're masking comms, likely Iranian operators," the electronic warfare officer said. Seconds later, a radar lock pinged one of the Hornets. The pilot didn't hesitate. "Fox 3, defensive," he called out, and a flare streaked into the darkness. At that same moment, the Growlers unleashed full-spectrum jamming, crushing the radar feed. The Hornet closed distance and confirmed visuals. A cargo ship, modified with radar arrays and missile canisters welded onto its deck. It wasn't pretending anymore. It was a launch platform. "Target confirmed hostile," came the call. "Weapons free." 2 JDAMs fell from 15,000 feet. The first hit midship, detonating fuel tanks. The second struck the radar mast, turning the deck into molten fire. The explosion rolled across the water like a shockwave. In under 3 minutes, the so-called cargo ship was gone, swallowed by flames and ocean. The Hornets pulled away, climbing back into the black sky, leaving only burning wreckage below. Back on the Eisenhower, the bridge went silent for a beat. Then came the confirmation. Target neutralized. 0 friendly losses. The commander nodded once and said quietly, "Message delivered." But deep down, everyone knew that was only the beginning. Someone had just tested the limits again, and this time, they hadn't survived long enough to learn the lesson. Now every satellite, every drone, every sonar buoy in the region was active. The Red Sea wasn't just being patrolled, it was being watched. Every pixel of ocean and coastline turned into part of a living surveillance net. And somewhere out there, another radar technician was sitting in a bunker, staring at his screen, wondering if turning it on would mean disappearing from the map forever. Because the new rule of this game was simple. Whoever blinks first, burns first. By nightfall, the world knew something had shifted. Again. No official statement, no broadcasted footage, but the satellite images told the story themselves. A ship in flames off the coast of Yemen, a smoldering scar on the water where coordinates once read "civilian vessel." Experts across the globe zoomed in on the photos. Those weren't cargo containers. They were missile canisters. And the message was clear as day. Somebody just crossed the line, and the US erased them in minutes. In Washington, the Pentagon's Situation Room went into overdrive. Real-time feeds from the Eisenhower and Truman battle groups streamed across giant monitors. Analysts confirmed what everyone already suspected. The destroyed vessel wasn't a Houthi operation at all. It was crewed by specialists, trained, equipped, and likely directed from Tehran. This wasn't a proxy move anymore. This was the next level, direct testing. By midnight, cyber teams were already inside Iranian-linked communications grids, mapping every encrypted channel that had gone silent after the explosion. Intelligence flagged sudden message blackouts from 3 coastal bases near Bandar Abbas, classic signs of emergency lockdowns. The US didn't need them to admit it. The data spoke for itself. And while Tehran stayed quiet publicly, the mood behind the scenes was pure panic. Officials scrambled to assess how their covert launch vessel had been tracked so quickly. No radio signals had been transmitted, no satellite uplinks were active, yet somehow the Americans had found them anyway. One Iranian officer allegedly muttered during a debrief, "They can see through the sea." Meanwhile, in the Red Sea, US carrier groups were moving like clockwork. The Eisenhower shifted north, the Truman angled south, and between them sat a no-go zone, a stretch of international water now patrolled by drones, fighters, and sonar-equipped destroyers. To the outside world, it looked like a routine exercise. To those who knew, it was the establishment of total spectrum dominance. Farther inland, intelligence networks started picking up strange chatter. Not from the Houthis, they'd gone radio silent after the strike, but from smaller militia cells spread across the region. They were trying to decode what had just happened. The story was traveling faster than any press release ever could. One ship, one radar ping, one retaliation. The result? Total annihilation. And yet, behind all the precision, something deeper was happening. The invisible war of data. In Virginia, at Langley, and at the NSA's cyber division, teams were running non-stop AI simulations, predicting the next move from every regional actor. The software, codenamed SpecterNet, was learning from live data, radar bursts, shipping routes, even cell phone signals bouncing off coastal towers. The goal wasn't just to monitor, it was to anticipate. In short, the Red Sea had become the world's most advanced, live training range for future warfare. A hybrid zone where digital algorithms and human pilots shared the same battlefield. And that's what really scared everyone watching. Because it wasn't just the US adapting, China was monitoring every engagement in silence. Their naval strategists studied how the Tomahawks coordinated with Growlers and Tritons, how command and control synced across hundreds of miles without delay. They weren't watching for politics, they were watching for tactics. Russian analysts, too, were digging deep, replaying radar signatures and satellite intercepts. They called it the Eisenhower Doctrine, the concept that any attack, no matter how small, could be met with full-spectrum retaliation in under 10 minutes. Moscow's defense circles debated whether they could match it. Most quietly agreed they couldn't. But the world wasn't done testing America yet. 3 days later, on April 5th, a new blip appeared over the Gulf of Aden. Not a missile, not a radar, something smaller. A drone. It was flying high, slow, and oddly familiar. It wasn't American, though. Its signature didn't match any NATO system. That's not ours, a Navy tech reported. For hours, the drone loitered on the edge of international airspace, just outside the engagement envelope. It didn't fire, didn't jam, didn't transmit. It simply watched. That was the point. A message in itself. Someone wanted to see how far they could get before being noticed, and notice they did. Within 20 minutes, a pair of FA-18s from the Truman were airborne, closing in fast. The drone tried to drift higher, climbing toward the clouds, but its feed suddenly glitched, jammed. The Growlers had arrived. Aboard the Eisenhower, the operations commander gave the order calmly. Shadow and intercept. Do not engage unless confirmed hostile. But when the Hornets got close enough, the pilots could see the markings on its side through night vision. Shade 171, an Iranian surveillance drone, the same type used years ago in the Persian Gulf. They didn't need to fire. The Growlers scrambled its controls until it lost guidance and fell, spiraling into the sea. No fireworks, no headlines, just another silent win in an invisible war. Hours later, back in Tehran, the drone's loss was quietly confirmed. No one said it out loud, but the realization was spreading. The Americans had built a kill box around the entire Red Sea. Every signal, every radar, every flying object was now under a digital microscope. In the following weeks, the region went eerily still. No launches, no provocations. Even commercial pilots started reporting the quiet. "It feels like the air is holding its breath," one captain said over radio. But behind that silence, the Pentagon was already looking ahead. Phase 4 of Clear Current was in motion, joint coordination with regional allies. Early discussions hinted at new partnerships with Gulf nations, drone basing rights, and a shared network of radar buoys capable of detecting missile launches the instant they left the ground. It was no longer about one fight, it was about shaping an entire theater. Meanwhile, footage from the March 22nd encounter finally leaked online. The F-16's head-up display, showing the missile lock, the flares, the chaos, it went viral overnight. Millions watched as the pilot's calm voice echoed through the radio. Fox 3 defensive. That clip became the symbol of modern US air dominance, quiet, efficient, unstoppable. But inside defense circles, the focus wasn't on the video. It was on the next question. What happens when the next actor steps in? Because history always repeats, and power always attracts challengers. Would it be another proxy militia, or something bigger? A direct test from a global rival looking to see if America's response time was as fast as it seemed? Nobody knew for sure, but one thing was certain. The Red Sea had become the proving ground for the future. A battlefield without borders, where silence was as deadly as sound. And in a world where a single radar pulse can start a chain reaction across continents, the real question isn't who fires first anymore. It's who's being watched when they do. By the second week of April, the silence over the Red Sea had grown almost unnerving. Merchant ships passed through under US protection, and the skies above the carrier groups were clearer than they'd been in months. But every analyst watching knew that kind of silence doesn't last by accident. It's the kind that comes when everyone's holding their breath, waiting for the next move. Behind closed doors in Washington, the National Security Council met for what insiders called a new phase discussion. Intelligence reports confirmed the US had successfully dismantled 3 separate Houthi radar networks, crippled their command links, and cut off a covert Iranian supply route through Eritrea. But there was a catch. Those losses hadn't stopped the flow of weapons entirely. Something, or someone, was still moving gear across the Red Sea. That's when the buzz began about Ghost Route Delta, a suspected smuggling corridor operating under civilian cover, using old cargo freighters disguised as humanitarian shipments. For months, it had gone unnoticed, until a satellite in low orbit picked up a faint heat bloom consistent with rocket fuel storage hidden below deck. It was subtle, but not subtle enough. And with that one reading, the US had its next lead. Aboard the USS Truman, preparations kicked off immediately. The air wing was put on standby, Growlers ready to jam, Hawkeyes ready to track, Hornets fueled and armed for intercept. But this time, the mission wasn't about launching an airstrike. It was about proof. Washington wanted eyes on the operation, physical, visual confirmation before they moved again. Just after midnight on April 11th, an MQ-9 Reaper drone, call sign Reaper 2-1, launched from an Allied base in Djibouti. It climbed high, crossing the water at 25,000 feet, heading toward the suspected route. Hours later, its sensors locked onto a vessel. No transponder, low signature, moving slowly north with its lights dimmed. It looked like a civilian freighter, but something about its heat pattern didn't add up. Too cold on the surface, too warm below, classic false heat masking. The order came through: maintain shadow, report anomalies. For 6 tense hours, the Reaper trailed it, recording every transmission. The ship sent no distress calls, no cargo updates, nothing. Just silence. But when its radar swept east toward the Yemeni coast, it pinged, twice, in military frequency ranges. That was the mistake. By the time the data reached the Eisenhower, the pattern was clear. The freighter wasn't just hauling goods, it was coordinating with land-based receivers, an encrypted command line connecting sea and shore. "We've got cross-linking," an analyst said. "They're moving components, live systems." That was all the confirmation needed. The order was approved under Operation Clear Current, Phase 5. The next morning, the Red Sea came alive again, quietly, efficiently, lethally. 2 F/A-18 Super Hornets lifted off from the Truman, escorted by a pair of EA-18G Growlers. High above them, a Triton drone relayed targeting data in real time. Their mission: disable, not destroy, yet. As the formation approached, the Growlers painted the air with wideband jamming. The Hornets went low, visual range, and what they saw through their night optics was shocking. Underneath the freighter's top deck were 4 sealed hatches, identical to those used on short-range ballistic launcher platforms. This wasn't a supply ship at all. It was a mobile launch pad hidden in plain sight. "Command, we have visual, confirming modified freighter. Advise next." The response was short: "Mark and track. Stand by for confirmation from DC." And then the waiting began, the longest 8 minutes in recent naval memory. Every second counted. The pilots could see movement on deck, men rushing, pulling tarps, maybe realizing they'd been spotted. "They're trying to power systems," one of the Growler officers warned. Finally, the order came. "Engage, precision disable, no secondary detonation risk." The lead Hornet dove first, locking in coordinates. 2 laser-guided bombs released, each hitting within inches of target. The deck erupted in a clean, contained blast. No chain reaction, just a perfect surgical hit. The second Hornet followed with a strafing pass, cutting the power generators and radar arrays. Within moments, the freighter was dark, dead in the water, its systems fried beyond recovery. Mission success. No civilian casualties, no collateral damage, just silence and smoke curling into the night sky. But this time, something different happened. Instead of disappearing from the map, the wreck was left floating, deliberately. A message left for anyone still thinking they could hide military tech behind humanitarian paint jobs. The US didn't just stop a launch, it exposed the method, and across the world people noticed. Satellite footage leaked within hours, grainy but unmistakable. A vessel burning, its hull cracked open, strange containers glowing beneath the wreckage. Independent analysts began connecting dots, publishing maps of the ghost route and tracing the smuggling line back toward Iranian territorial waters. The internet exploded with theories and fear. Tehran tried to play it cool, claiming the ship was a private cargo transport, but international maritime logs proved otherwise. The IMO number was fake. The crew registry? Non-existent. Every lie unraveled in real time. The mask was gone. Inside the Eisenhower's Combat Information Center, The mood was cold, professional. Mission complete, data logged, next task queued. But to those watching from outside, it was something bigger, a turning point. The US Navy had turned precision warfare into art, executing dominance without declaring war. In the following 48 hours, the ripple effect was massive. Smuggling routes through Eritrea went dark. Iranian-linked networks went silent. Even regional militias began relocating inland, abandoning coastal sites altogether. The Red Sea wasn't just calm anymore. It was owned. And yet, not everyone was happy about that. Reports started surfacing from Moscow and Beijing, quiet deployments, increased reconnaissance near key choke points. They weren't stepping in, not yet, but they were watching, closely, testing, measuring, because this wasn't just a clash over missiles or ships. It was about control. Control of the narrative, control of the data, control of the future battlefield. And one thing was clear now. The next confrontation wouldn't start with a missile streaking through the night sky. It would start with a silent flicker on a radar screen, a data burst in the ether, a line of code injected into a satellite feed. Because modern war isn't just fought with weapons anymore, it's fought with visibility. Whoever controls what's seen wins before the first shots ever fired. By mid-April, the world had entered a new kind of silence, the kind that hums beneath the surface, waiting for something to snap. The Red Sea was eerily calm, shipping lanes wide open, tankers moving freely under watchful US patrols. But beneath that calm, the war had evolved. It wasn't about missiles anymore. It was about data. Inside the Pentagon, the Joint Operations Command was alive with quiet urgency. Massive screens showed live feeds of every inch of the Red Sea corridor. Thermal scans, radar sweeps, drone feeds, even satellite telemetry. On one wall, a glowing title, Phase 6, Digital Confinement. This phase wasn't about striking back. It was about locking in control. Every signal, every ping, every electronic whisper within 500 nautical miles of Yemen was now being tracked by an overlapping mesh of satellites, warships, and reconnaissance aircraft. The US had built an invisible fence across the sea. But here's where things got wild. Someone was trying to breach it. At 2:43 local time, a burst of encrypted traffic spiked from the northern coastline of Eritrea, a signal so short it almost went unnoticed. Analysts caught it just in time, a microsecond ping bouncing across 3 relay nodes before vanishing. To most systems, it was nothing. To US cyber teams, it screamed covert transmission. "Flag that signature," an analyst said, typing fast. Within seconds, the data spread across the network. The pattern matched a known Iranian encryption type, one previously used by drone coordination units. This wasn't random noise, it was a test. From the Eisenhower's CIC, the order went out. Cyber Command green-lighted, run full trace. That's when the Ghost War began. Somewhere deep under Fort Meade, US Cyber Command launched its counterstrike, Operation Signal Lock. A digital probe fired back across the same channels, tracing the encrypted signal back to its origin. The path twisted through VPN tunnels, bounced off dark web nodes, rerouted through servers in Russia, then Turkey, before finally landing on one unmarked facility near Asmara. It was subtle, but it was enough. The coordinates popped up on the Eisenhower's central display, and within minutes, a Triton drone was redirected to high orbit, silent, steady, watching. From 55,000 feet, its infrared sensors caught faint movement. Trucks, satellite dishes, and a cluster of antennas hidden under camouflage netting. A secret coastal relay site, possibly part of a new Iranian-backed electronic network. The order from command was sharp and calm. Eyes only, confirmed transmissions, no kinetic action until proof of hostile control. For 6 long hours, the drone hovered. It caught faint radio exchanges, coded bursts of numbers, even what sounded like signal coordination chatter. That was enough. The proof was logged, confirmed, and forwarded up the chain. The Pentagon now had full authorization to act. This time, the response wasn't a missile or a bomb. It was a pulse. From hundreds of miles away, aboard the USS Truman, a specialized EA-18G Growler was armed with a new payload, an electromagnetic suppression wave. No explosions, no fire, just pure signal dominance. At dawn, the Growler flew in low, released the pulse, and turned the entire enemy relay site into a dead zone. Every screen, every radar, every transmitter, gone. Silenced. Even satellite uplinks dropped offline instantly. The whole network died in under 30 seconds. And here's the genius part. There was nothing to show for it. No smoke, no destruction, no visible damage. Just a digital blackout so clean that by the time local crews realized what happened, their systems were already fried beyond repair. That strike, quiet, surgical, invisible, shook the global cyber community. Military think tanks across Europe called it the dawn of invisible warfare. For the first time, a battlefield victory was achieved without firing a single explosive round. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Washington's allies were catching on. NATO announced a closed-door emergency briefing titled Spectrum Security Operations, and rumors leaked that the US was building a joint task force with British and French navies to extend the same system into the Arabian Sea. The goal? A full maritime surveillance grid, something so advanced it could see a radar pulse from space and track it down to the operator's keyboard. But not everyone was happy about it. In Moscow, analysts labeled it a digital blockade. In Beijing, defense journals warned that America's expanding surveillance could destabilize global electronic balance. And in Tehran, fury. Officials called it technological aggression, a fancy phrase for "we can't hide anymore." Iran's military began broadcasting on new encrypted frequencies, testing digital camouflage systems, and moving key personnel inland. Their foreign ministry called for a UN inquiry, but everyone knew it was theater. Behind the speeches, they were scrambling, and amid all that chaos, one transmission slipped through. A coded burst intercepted by American satellites, believed to originate from an Iranian research vessel operating in the Indian Ocean. It read, simply, Project Saffron Phase 1, ready for field test. Nobody knew what that meant yet, but analysts immediately flagged it. Something new was coming. Something experimental. Back aboard the Eisenhower, commanders exchanged glances. "They're adjusting," one said quietly. "They're trying to find a new domain to fight us in." The response from the air boss was cold and certain. "Then we'll meet them there." And just like that, preparations began for Operation Deep Current, the next phase in this unseen war, a hybrid mission designed to stretch from sea to sky to cyber. The plan was simple but deadly. Combine electronic jamming, satellite spoofing, and unmanned drone interception into one seamless chain, a move that would redefine modern deterrence. Meanwhile, whispers spread across the intelligence community. Reports of unknown drones spotted near the Horn of Africa, moving with AI-driven flight patterns unlike anything seen before. Were they Iranian prototypes? Chinese tech being field tested? Nobody could confirm. But one thing was clear. The game was evolving fast. The Red Sea was no longer a hotspot. It was a proving ground, a silent war zone where the real battles were fought in frequencies, not flames. And as the US Navy strengthened its digital perimeter, one truth echoed through every briefing, every declassified document, every late-night intelligence call. This wasn't about one region anymore. The Red Sea had just become the model for the next era of conflict, where dominance isn't measured in missiles fired, but in how long you can stay unseen before the sky finds you. And that, right there, is how the new battlefield is being built. Not with explosions, but with precision, stealth, and data that moves faster than bullets ever could. The Red Sea turned from a flashpoint into a blueprint, a live example of how modern power isn't just about how loud you strike. It's about how quietly you control the fight. So now the question's yours. What do you think comes next? Do you believe these new, invisible wars will make the world safer, or just more unpredictable? Could a single digital signal trigger the next global standoff? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take on this because this isn't just history unfolding, it's the future of warfare happening in real time. If this story gave you chills, clarity, or even a new respect for how fast the game's changing, then hit like so I know you felt it too. Smash that subscribe button to stay ahead of the next mission before it even hits the headlines, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you're the first in when the next operation drops. And if you want to go one step further, join the fleet. You'll get loyalty badges, priority replies, and early access to breakdowns of real naval and intelligence operations. Click join on our channel page, step aboard, and help us bring more untold military stories to the surface. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and remember, one signal can start a war. But the response, that's what ends it.